It was a busy Saturday afternoon at the local guitar shop, the kind of place where the smell of polished wood and new strings mixed with the faint hum of air conditioning. Customers moved from wall to wall, testing guitars, tapping on drum kits, and comparing amps. Kids ran around in excitement, parents tried to keep up, and the usual background chatter filled the air. But one young man stood out like a beacon in the middle of all this noise. He wasn't browsing for a guitar. He wasn't testing amps or strumming chords. He was simply standing there, completely absorbed, speaking in a low, urgent voice that carried over the soft hum of the shop. He's my hero," he said, almost reverently. His eyes sparkled with a mix of admiration and awe, and his hands moved as if he were conducting some invisible orchestra. Minutes passed, and the words kept coming. "I wouldn't even be here without him. He's the reason I picked up the guitar. He's the reason I practice every day. I've never met anyone like him, and I just have to say it." Customers glanced over, some amused, some bemused, some silently impressed. 20 minutes went by, and the young man had not paused once. His passion was relentless, almost hypnotic, drawing the attention of everyone who happened to be in the shop. Some people whispered to each other. "Who's he talking about?" A woman murmured. "I don't know, but he's really into it," her friend replied. Others just shook their heads, assuming it was some kid being dramatic. But for anyone listening closely, there was a certain electricity in his words, an honesty and devotion so raw that it made the room feel smaller, more intimate, almost sacred. Even the store clerk behind the counter had stopped what he was doing. He leaned on the register, eyebrows raised, listening in fascination. There was something different about this kid. Something more than just youthful enthusiasm. It was the kind of admiration that came from pure, unfiltered respect, a reverence that only heroes inspire. The young man wasn't performing for attention. He wasn't seeking approval. He wasn't even looking at anyone in particular. He was speaking from the heart, letting his feelings spill out, entirely unfiltered, entirely sincere. And in that crowded, noisy guitar shop, amidst the strumming and chatter and sales pitches, one line repeated itself like a heartbeat. "Has my hero, he's my hero, he's my hero." The guitar shop was a world of its own, a place where time seemed to slow down as soon as you stepped inside. Sunlight poured in through the large front windows, hitting the polished surfaces of the guitars and reflecting off the shiny metal strings. Every wall was covered in instruments, from sleek electric guitars with glossy finishes to well-worn acoustic models that had clearly been played 100 times over. Rows of amplifiers lined the floor, humming softly with the residual electricity of the day, and racks of guitar straps, picks, and cables were scattered around like treasure waiting to be discovered. A faint scent of polish and old wood mingled with the aroma of vinyl and leather, a smell that made the shop feel alive. You could hear the faint squeak of guitar stands being moved, the soft thrum of bass strings being plucked, and the occasional clatter of a pick falling onto the wooden floor. It was the kind of place where a musician could lose themselves entirely, caught between the past and the present, the familiar tones of classic guitars blending with the new, cutting-edge sounds of modern instruments. People wandered through the aisles, some testing out guitars with careful precision, others wandering aimlessly, drawn more by curiosity than purpose. Parents followed children who had already run ahead to examine drum kits or keyboard setups. Occasional laughter bounced off the walls when someone struck a chord that didn't quite land, and the faint echo of conversation mixed with the low hum of the shop's music system. Every corner seemed alive with possibility, a place where talent could be nurtured or dreams could be sparked in an instant. Amid this controlled chaos, the young man remained in the center of the floor, completely absorbed in his own world. He didn't glance at the walls, didn't check out the amplifiers, and didn't respond to the murmurs of other customers. His eyes were fixed on something invisible, a figure in his mind that carried more meaning than any instrument in the shop. His repeated declaration, "He's my hero," seemed almost out of place here, but at the same time, it fit perfectly. It was as if the room itself had paused to accommodate his devotion. Even the staff had begun to notice. The clerk behind the counter, initially busy restocking picks, now leaned slightly forward, ears straining to catch every word. Others glanced over curious, intrigued by the intensity radiating from a single person in a place filled with sound movement and distraction. For 20 minutes, the young man's words echoed through the shop, filling it with a strange kind of quiet energy. It wasn't loud, but it demanded attention. Every corner of the room seemed to lean in, every instrument, every person, and every echo of sound harmonizing with the intensity of his admiration. In that cluttered, bustling space filled with noise and activity, his words stood out like a beacon, signaling that something extraordinary was about to happen. As the young man continued to speak, his voice unwavering despite the passing minutes, a subtle tension began to build in the shop. Customers who had initially ignored him or assumed he was just another overzealous fan started to glance in his direction. Their curiosity was natural. After all, 20 minutes of uninterrupted admiration in a busy guitar shop was unusual, even in a place where music and passion collided every day. Some leaned on counters, whispering to companions, trying to make sense of what they were witnessing. The clerk behind the counter, who had seen thousands of customers come and go, had stopped restocking and was now fully focused on the boy. Something about the intensity in his voice, the almost sacred reverence behind each word, drew attention in a way that no ordinary monologue could. The boy's hands moved constantly, sometimes emphasizing a point, sometimes tracing the shape of an imaginary instrument only he could see. It was as if he were painting a picture with words, his voice the brush, his passion the color. Yet, despite the fascination, nobody seemed to know who exactly he was speaking about. Whispers spread quickly through the aisles. One woman leaned over to her friend, her voice hushed. "Do you know who he's talking about?" The friend shook her head. "No idea, but whoever it is, he clearly means a lot to him." People began to edge closer, trying to catch a glimpse of what had captured the boy's unwavering attention. It wasn't just the repetition of, "He's my hero." It was the emotion behind it, the kind that made you stop mid-step, lean in, and really listen. Even a few teenage customers, who had initially been scrolling on their phones, paused to look up. They exchanged confused glances, wondering if this was some viral stunt, or just a kid being dramatic. But something about the sincerity in his voice made it impossible to dismiss. Every word carried weight. Every pause, every small hesitation seemed intentional, meant to convey more than the words alone could capture. The room felt smaller, more intimate, as if the boy's words had created a private bubble in the middle of the bustling store. Behind the boy near the entrance, an older man quietly walked in. He moved slowly, almost imperceptibly, blending in with the other customers. Wrapped in a long coat and scarf, he seemed like any other person browsing the shop. Yet there was an unspoken electricity in the air, a subtle shift that made even the staff notice something different without knowing exactly what it was. And then the first real question entered the minds of everyone paying attention. Who was he talking about with such devotion? No one knew, and the boy didn't seem to care. He had been speaking from his heart the entire time, utterly unaware that the answer to that question was closer than anyone could imagine. The mystery hung over the shop like a soft, vibrating toward, unresolved, tantalizing, and impossible to ignore. Every person who glanced at him now wondered the same thing. Could the object of his admiration possibly be standing somewhere in the room, listening to every word? The tension grew thicker with each passing moment. The shop, once filled with casual noise, now felt charged. Every footstep, every shuffle of paper, even the faint hum of an amplifier seemed amplified. The mystery wasn't just about who inspired the boy, it was about what was about to happen next. The young man's words continued to flow, each one carrying the weight of years of admiration and unspoken dreams. "He's the reason I didn't give up on music," he said, his voice quivering slightly, not from nerves but from the sheer intensity of feeling. "The reason I practice every day. The reason I even picked up the guitar in the first place. If it weren't for him, I wouldn't be standing here today." His hands gestured wildly as if trying to paint the image of this figure in the air, fingers tracing invisible chords, invisible melodies only he could hear. Customers passing by paused mid-step, unsure whether to continue browsing or stop and listen. There was a magnetic pull in the way he spoke, a sincerity so rare that it transcended the noise of the shop. People whispered quietly, trying not to interrupt, yet unable to tear their eyes away. "I've watched every video, listened to every interview, learned every song I could find," the boy continued, leaning forward slightly as if sharing a secret with the universe itself. "He's inspired me to keep going when everything felt impossible. Every time I pick up my guitar, I feel like he's right there with me, telling me it's okay to dream, even when no one else believes in you." A small crowd had now gathered, drawn by the raw honesty in his voice. Some stood with arms crossed, skeptical at first, But gradually even the cynics softened. Others pulled out their phones not to mock, but to capture the moment, recognizing that what they were witnessing wasn't just admiration, it was something profound, almost sacred. The boy didn't pause, didn't acknowledge the growing audience. He was speaking directly to the person who had inspired him, though the identity remained a mystery to everyone around him. "He doesn't know me," the boy said, almost to himself, his voice carrying a note of longing. "But he's changed my life. He's the reason I wake up every morning and pick up my guitar, even when it feels like the whole world is against me." His voice cracked slightly as he added, "He's my hero, my absolute hero, and I needed someone to know it, to know how much he means to me." Even the staff behind the counter leaned closer now, caught between disbelief and admiration. The young man's words had transformed the ordinary shop into a stage, and every listener had been pulled into his personal story. There was no pretense, no exaggeration, just pure unfiltered emotion. As he spoke, the air seemed to shift. The energy in the room became heavier, more charged, as if the universe itself was pausing to listen. And somewhere near the entrance, a man who had entered quietly earlier stopped in his tracks. He didn't yet reveal himself, but his eyes narrowed slightly, curiosity and something else, recognition flaring quietly. For the boy, it didn't matter. He kept going, lost in the flow of his own devotion, oblivious to everything else. "You've given me hope when I had none. You've shown me that even when life is hard, I can still dream. That's why you're my hero." And in that moment, the room hung on his every word, waiting for the inevitable, life-changing revelation that none of them could yet imagine. As the young man's words filled the shop, a quiet hum of anticipation seemed to ripple through the air. Customers who had once wandered casually between guitar racks now found themselves frozen, their attention captured by a force they couldn't quite explain. The boy didn't notice them. He didn't notice the whispers or the glances, or the slight widening of eyes in the crowd. He only saw the figure in his mind. The person he had been speaking about for 20 uninterrupted minutes, and he continued as if that figure were standing right in front of him. Near the entrance, the older man who had quietly entered minutes earlier paused. He leaned slightly on his cane, observing the boy with a mixture of curiosity and something deeper, something almost familiar. He had heard countless fans gush over his work, some politely, some awkwardly, but there was a difference here. This wasn't admiration as a passing thought or a casual compliment. This was devotion, unwavering and heartfelt, as if the boy had been carrying it for years, waiting for the right moment, or maybe the right person, to finally acknowledge it. The young man's voice rose slightly, not in anger, but in urgency. "I've tried to tell him so many times, but I never could. No one listens the way he deserves. People think it's just music, but it's more than that. It's life, it's hope, it's everything I've needed to keep going." His eyes glistened with unshed tears, his hands trembling slightly as he emphasized each point. The shop felt smaller somehow, as if it had contracted around the boy and the invisible figure he adored. Even those who had initially dismissed him couldn't ignore the intensity. A mother holding her child leaned closer, whispering, "Who is he talking about? Do you know?" Her friend shook her head, equally puzzled but captivated. Every visitor, employee, and casual passerby now felt the weight of the moment, even if they didn't fully understand it. The older man stepped a few feet closer, his long coat brushing against the polished floor, though he remained careful to stay in the background. He watched the boy intently, noting the raw sincerity in his every gesture, the absolute certainty in his voice, the way his admiration didn't come from superficial fandom, but from a place deep within. He recognized that fire. He had felt it in himself as a young man, the same mixture of hope and desperation, of reverence and longing, all directed toward someone who had once inspired him in the same way. The young man continued, oblivious to the growing awareness around him. "He doesn't know me. He'll probably never even notice me. But I needed someone to hear this, someone to know just how much he's meant to me. That's why I keep saying it. That's why I keep trying. He's my hero." And then, almost imperceptibly, a question began forming in the minds of everyone watching. Could the person he's been talking about actually be here in the shop, listening to every single word? The boy's voice echoed again, soft but insistent, wrapping the entire room in a bubble of devotion. Customers shifted uneasily, caught between disbelief and anticipation. The older man, still standing quietly near the entrance, felt a familiar tug in his chest. Recognition, yes, but also wonder. He had entered the shop thinking he would browse quietly, maybe pick up a few items, maybe make small talk. Now, all of that seemed trivial. Something extraordinary was unfolding, and he was right at the center of it without anyone realizing it yet. The subtle tension in the shop grew heavier with every word the boy spoke. Everyone present sensed that this wasn't an ordinary moment, that something was about to happen that could change lives forever. And just like that, the stage was perfectly set for a revelation that nobody, except perhaps the boy, could have predicted. The young man's voice had grown quieter now, but no less intense. Every word carried the weight of years of admiration, each syllable infused with a kind of raw honesty that made the air feel electric. "I've never met anyone like him," he said, his eyes glimmering as he traced invisible chords with his fingers. "And I just needed someone to know to understand how much he's meant to me." For the first time, a hush fell over the shop. The usual background noise, the hum of amps, the clatter of picks, the casual chatter of customers, seemed to fade into insignificance. People stopped moving, craning their necks to listen more closely. The boy didn't even notice. He was lost in his own world, speaking to a figure only he could see. Near the entrance, the older man shifted slightly, his eyes narrowing as he observed the boy. There was something about the way the young man spoke, so passionately, so genuinely, without a hint of exaggeration or pretense, that caused a faint smile to cross the man's weathered face. He had heard admiration before, countless times, but this was different. This was pure. This was devotion distilled to its essence. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, recognition began to bloom in his chest. The boy's words grew more urgent, more desperate, as if he were trying to bridge a gap that had existed for years. "I don't know if he'll ever notice me, and maybe I'll never get the chance to tell him how much he's changed my life. But I just can't stop saying it. He's my hero. He's my hero. He's my hero." His voice cracked on the last repetition, the emotion so raw that a few listeners felt a lump in their throats. Then it happened. The older man took a small, careful step forward, deliberately subtle but deliberate nonetheless. The boy, caught mid-sentence, finally looked up, squinting at the figure in the doorway, his eyes widened in disbelief. There was something strangely familiar about this man: long silver-streaked hair, a weathered but kind face, an aura that seemed to command attention without demanding it. A slow realization began to creep into the young man's mind. "Wait, no, it can't be," he whispered, almost to himself, voice trembling. Could it really be him? The older man's lips curled into a quiet, knowing smile. "Guilty as charged, mate," he said softly, his voice calm but unmistakably confident. "And you've got a lot to say about me, haven't you?" The shop seemed to hold its breath. The customers, previously murmuring among themselves, froze in place, realizing that the boy's hero, the person he had been praising for 20 minutes straight, was standing right there, listening to every word. Phones were subtly raised, cameras discreetly pointed, but all of it seemed secondary to the gravity of the moment. The boy's hands trembled as he took a tentative step forward.
You're Ozzy."
His voice was barely audible, a mixture of awe, disbelief, and the overwhelming reality of finally seeing the person who had inspired him for so long. Ozzy chuckled, a warm, gentle sound that seemed to ease the tension in the room. "Guilty as charged, mate," he repeated, leaning slightly forward. "And I have to say, it's not every day someone talks about me like that for 20 minutes straight." The boy blinked, still trying to process the impossible truth. He had spent 2 decades, or at least it felt that long, admiring this man from afar, never imagining he'd be standing face to face with him in the middle of a crowded guitar shop. And yet here he was. The realization hit like a lightning bolt. Could the person he's been praising for all this time really be standing right in front of him, listening to every word? For a moment, everything else in the shop vanished. The instruments, the other customers, the ambient noise. It was just him and Ozzy, hero and admirer, caught in a perfect, impossible collision of reality and dreams. The boy froze in place, his guitar dangling loosely in his hands. His heart pounded in his chest, a rapid, chaotic rhythm that seemed to echo through the quieted shop. For 20 minutes, he had poured his admiration into words, speaking to an invisible figure that had lived in his imagination for years. And now, that figure, his hero, the reason he had picked up the guitar, the source of every late night practice and every attempt at perfection, was standing right in front of him. You're really Ozzy?" he asked again, his voice shaking, caught somewhere between disbelief and awe. He could barely breathe. the words feeling too small for the magnitude of the moment. His hero, the man whose music had given him hope through dark times, was here. Listening. Right here. Ozzy leaned against the edge of the counter, his long silver-streaked hair falling lightly across his face. A quiet, gentle smile played on his lips. Guilty as charged. "Mate," he said softly. His voice carried warmth and familiarity, the kind of voice that could calm a storm or encourage someone to take a leap of faith. "And I have to tell you, you've got a lot to say about me." "That's quite the monologue you've been delivering." The boy blinked rapidly, trying to process the impossible reality. He had rehearsed this encounter 1,000 times in his mind, but never in his wildest dreams had he imagined it would unfold like this. The walls of the shop, the rows of guitars, the amps humming softly, the scattered customers, seemed to dissolve around him. For the first time, it wasn't just admiration or fandom, it was connection. Real, tangible, undeniable connection. His hands shook as he gripped the neck of his guitar. I didn't think, I never thought I'd actually get to tell you this. I've listened to you, watched you, learned from you, and I had to tell someone. I had to say it. You've changed my life." Ozzy's eyes softened, reflecting a mixture of pride and recognition. He had seen thousands of fans over the years, heard countless proclamations of admiration, but this was different. This was raw, unfiltered, honest. The kind of sincerity that could only come from someone who had truly been touched, whose life had been shaped by the art and the person behind it.
"Mate,"
Ozzy said, leaning in slightly. "You don't know how much it means to hear that, really. Most people just mumble, take a photo, or yell out a line of lyrics, but you've spoken from your heart. 20 minutes straight. And you didn't stop, didn't worry about anyone else. That's real devotion." The boy swallowed hard, his throat tight. I just had to say it. I've wanted to for so long. I've never met anyone who made me feel like I could actually do something with my music, who made me believe I could keep going. You've been my hero since I can remember." Ozzy placed a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. The contact was light, grounding, yet it carried an unspoken weight of understanding and acknowledgement. "And now you know that you've been heard," Ozzy said. "That's all anyone really wants, isn't it? To be seen, to be understood. You've got a spark in you. Don't let it fade." The boy's eyes brimmed with tears, but a small smile began to spread across his face. The realization had settled fully in his mind now. This wasn't a dream, a fantasy, or some fleeting encounter. This was real. He was standing face to face with the person who had inspired him for so long, and that hero had acknowledged him. A hush fell over the shop. The customers, who had been observing quietly, felt the shift too. Something extraordinary had just happened in their midst, a collision of passion and reality that few would ever witness. For the boy, the world had changed in an instant. The hero he had admired for years was no longer distant or untouchable. He was right here, listening, understanding, and recognizing the devotion that had driven the boy to pour his heart out, unafraid and unfiltered. And in that quiet, charged moment, the young man understood something profoundly simple. Admiration alone had brought him to this point. But courage, the courage to speak, to express himself fully, to never hold back, had made the impossible real. He had realized that heroes were not just idols to watch from afar. They could become part of your story, if only you dared to reach for them. For a long moment, the boy simply stared at Ozzy, his mouth slightly open, his fingers still resting lightly on the neck of his guitar. The realization that he was standing in front of his hero, the man who had inspired him through countless late nights of practice, the music that had carried him through hard times, was slowly settling in. Every instinct told him to step back, to hold his words inside, but the truth, finally unfiltered and undeniable, spilled out in a trembling whisper. You really want to hear all this?" he asked, voice cracking. "All these things I've been saying for 20 minutes. Ozzy chuckled, the sound warm and easy, a reassurance that melted some of the tension coiling in the boy's chest. "Of course I do, mate," he said, his accent soft but unmistakable. "That's why I'm here. You've been speaking from your heart, and that's rare. I want to hear it." The boy swallowed hard, trying to steady himself. For years he had spoken to a figure in his imagination, rehearsing conversations, imagining what it might feel like to be noticed, to be acknowledged, to be recognized. And now, here was the real thing. And he wasn't just being seen, he was being understood. "I've watched you for years," he began, voice slightly stronger now, bolstered by the reassurance in Ozzy's eyes. Every video, every song I've learned from you. You've given me hope when things were so dark. Music was all I had, and you made it feel like it could be enough. His fingers tightened slightly on the guitar, almost unconsciously, as if the instrument itself could amplify his words. Ozzy listened silently, leaning a little closer, his gaze steady and unbroken. He had heard fans speak in adoration, some polite, some dramatic, some awkward. But this was different. This wasn't flattery or fandom, it was gratitude, raw and unguarded. Coming from someone who had been through struggles, someone who understood loss and the power of music to heal. You don't know how much it means to me to hear that, Ozzy said quietly. Really. Most people just mumble a line, take a photo, or scream a lyric. But you've spoken from your heart. That takes courage. The boy's eyes widened, the words sinking in. I have never had the chance to say it to anyone like this, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I've never met anyone who actually listens, who understands why it matters so much. Ozzy smiled, a faint twinkle in his eye. Mate, that's the thing. We all need someone to listen sometimes. And you, well, you've shown me that devotion like this isn't about being famous or standing on a stage. It's about honesty. It's about pouring yourself out and trusting someone will notice. The boy's breathing steadied, though excitement and awe still tinged every gesture. He glanced down at his guitar, then back at Ozzy. I wanted you to know how much of a hero you are, how much of an inspiration, how much your music, your message, everything, has kept me going when nothing else could. Ozzy reached out and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, firm but gentle. And now you know I hear you. And that's all that matters. For a few seconds, neither spoke. The shop was quiet, as if even the air had paused to allow this moment to exist. The customers who had been watching cautiously shifted, sensing that this interaction was no ordinary fan encounter. It was something sacred, something rare. Finally, Ozzy leaned back slightly and added, You've got talent, mate. Not just the music you play, but the heart behind it. Don't ever lose that. And don't be afraid to speak your truth. It will take you farther than anything else ever could. The boy's lips curved into a small, tentative smile, eyes glistening with emotion. For the first time in years, he felt seen, understood, and valued. The hero he had idolized had not only heard him, but he had acknowledged him, recognized him, and connected with him in a way that no amount of practice, no amount of admiration from afar, could have ever achieved. It was more than an interaction. It was validation, connection, and inspiration wrapped into one perfect moment. And as the boy stood there, finally able to catch his breath, he realized that this meeting was just the beginning. The boy's hands were still trembling as he lowered his guitar slightly, though he didn't put it down. His chest heaved with a mixture of disbelief, excitement, and relief. For 20 minutes, he had poured every ounce of his admiration into words, never pausing, never holding back. And now, standing face to face with Ozzy, the man who had shaped the soundtrack of his life, it all felt surreal, almost too perfect to be real. Ozzy, sensing the weight of the moment, didn't rush him. He let the boy find his words, giving him the space to breathe, to process, to exist fully in this once, in a lifetime encounter. His silver-streaked hair caught the light from the shop windows, and his eyes, sharp yet kind, never wavered from the boy. There was a patience in him, a respect that went far beyond the role of rock star, and touched something more profound, humanity itself. I can't believe this is happening, the boy said finally, his voice barely more than a whisper. I've imagined this moment 1,000 times in my head, but never like this, never real. And he paused, shaking his head, overwhelmed by the flood of emotion. I've wanted to tell you so much for so long. I've wanted to say it to someone who would understand. Ozzy nodded slowly. I get it, mate. I do. Most people think fame is all about lights and applause. But the truth is, it's the connection. That's what matters. Seeing someone pour their heart out, trusting me to hear it, that's more important than any stage or studio. That's real. And that's what makes moments like this unforgettable. The boy's eyes brimmed with tears. He looked around the shop at the other customers, who had gone completely silent, watching the encounter with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Phones were out, but no one dared interrupt. It felt like the room had shifted, as if the outside world had melted away, leaving only this small bubble of human connection, raw and unfiltered. I don't even know if I can put it into words, the boy admitted. I've admired you for so long. I've learned from you. I've tried to play like you, think like you, even breathe like you when I'm practicing. And I've never met anyone I felt like I could just tell everything to. And now, his voice cracked. No, you're here. You're really here. And I don't know, it's more than I ever imagined. Ozzy's expression softened, and he took a measured breath before leaning slightly closer. Mate, sometimes the people we admire the most aren't just names or voices on a screen. They're examples. They show us what's possible, what courage looks like. But the real question is this: how can someone admire you so much without ever meeting you? The boy blinked at the question, caught off guard by its simplicity yet the depth of its meaning. He thought for a moment, considering all the late nights spent listening to music, the countless hours practicing alone, the letters he had written but never sent. I guess it's because I felt connected, he said slowly. Even without knowing you, I could feel the heart behind your music. I could feel your story, your struggles, the honesty in your songs. That was enough to make me believe I could keep going, too. Ozzy nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Exactly, mate. That's it. Music, art, inspiration, it doesn't need a handshake to reach someone. Sometimes it just finds its way into the right person at the right time. He paused, letting the words sink in. And you let it in. That's why I'm standing here. That's why this is happening. The boy's chest swelled with a mixture of pride and awe. The question lingered in the air, unspoken yet palpable. How can someone admire you so much without ever meeting you? And now, standing in front of his hero, he understood the answer. It wasn't just about admiration. It was about openness, about courage, about allowing inspiration to shape you into someone who could, one day, be recognized and understood. The shop remained quiet, the hum of guitars and faint whispers fading into insignificance. The boy met Ozzy's gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. For a moment, nothing else mattered. Not the crowd, not the cameras, not the outside world. Just admiration, connection, and the raw, transformative power of being truly seen. The boy finally lowered his guitar completely, letting it rest against his leg. His hands were still shaking slightly, but the trembling had changed. It was no longer the result of nervous disbelief. Now it was a mixture of excitement, awe, and relief. He had spoken from his heart, unfiltered, uninterrupted for 20 minutes, and the impossible had happened. His hero, Ozzy, had not only heard him, but acknowledged him, recognized him, and even engaged with him. Ozzy stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. You've got something special, mate, he said softly. Not just your music, not just your admiration, but the way you put yourself out there. Courage like that doesn't come from talent alone. It comes from honesty. It comes from heart. And that's why I had to meet you. The boy swallowed hard, his throat tight with emotion. He had spent years idolizing this man from afar, imagining moments like this in the quiet corners of his room, the backseat of his car, or late at night when no one was watching. He had never believed it could actually happen, never imagined that the person he had admired so intensely could be standing right here, in a guitar shop in the middle of the city, listening to every word. I don't even know what to say, the boy admitted, his voice trembling but determined. I've wanted to tell you for so long, and now it's real. I can't believe it. Ozzy's smile softened, his eyes warm. Sometimes the moments we imagine in our heads come true in ways we never expect. But it's not just about meeting your hero. It's about what you do with that inspiration. What matters is what you take from it, how it shapes you, and how you pass it on. That's the real gift. The boy nodded, feeling the weight of those words sink in. It wasn't just about admiration anymore. It was about transformation. All the late nights spent practicing, all the small victories and setbacks, all the devotion he had poured into this unseen figure, now it had purpose beyond himself. He had been recognized, yes, but he had also learned that inspiration was a two-way street. The courage to express it could create connection, impact, and even change. A question surfaced in his mind, unspoken at first, then finally vocalized. Could someone really change your life without even knowing it? He looked up at Ozzy, whose expression suggested he already knew the answer. Absolutely, Ozzy said quietly. Every person you admire, every song, every story, every moment of inspiration. It can reach someone in ways you'll never fully understand. And sometimes, if you're brave enough to speak your truth, you can create something extraordinary, even if you never expected it. The boy's lips curved into a tentative smile, tears glistening in his eyes. For the first time, he felt fully seen, fully understood, and fully connected. It wasn't about fame or recognition or applause. It was about being acknowledged for his honesty, for the devotion he had carried for so long, for the courage to speak his heart. Around them, the shop remained quiet, customers hushed in awe, phones momentarily forgotten. The energy in the room had shifted from casual curiosity to reverent attention. People witnessed something rare, the collision of hero and admirer, of inspiration and expression, of devotion and acknowledgement. Ozzy gestured toward the guitar in the boy's hands. "Keep playing, mate. Keep speaking your truth, and remember this moment, the fact that your honesty brought us together. That's something worth holding on to forever." The boy nodded, feeling a sense of peace and purpose settle over him. He had started as a fan, lost in admiration and longing. But now, he was something more, inspired, seen, and motivated to carry that inspiration forward. And in that realization, he understood the true payoff of courage, connection, and unfiltered devotion. He looked at Ozzy, a final question lingering in his mind, unspoken but heavy with meaning. Could one moment of bravery truly shape a lifetime? The answer, as he now realized, was already unfolding in the quiet strength of his heartbeat, in the tremble of his hands, and in the certainty that his life would never be the same again. The shop had returned to its usual rhythm, soft strums of guitars being tested, the faint hum of amplifiers, the occasional laugh or shuffle of footsteps. But for the boy and Ozzy, time seemed to move differently. Every sound, every movement, every glance felt secondary to the extraordinary connection that had just taken place. The boy's chest still throbbed with adrenaline and awe, but beneath it was a quiet, steady sense of peace. He glanced down at his guitar, fingers brushing the strings lightly. It had always been more than an instrument to him. It had been a lifeline, a companion through loneliness, a channel for hope. Now it was a bridge between admiration and recognition, between fantasy and reality. He had spoken from his heart, and the universe had responded in a way he could never have imagined. Ozzy watched him with a gentle pride, that knowing smile never leaving his face. "You've got something, mate," he said quietly. "Not just the talent, but the heart. Don't ever lose that. And remember, it doesn't matter how big the stage is, how loud the applause is, or how many people are watching. What matters is the honesty you bring to it." The boy nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of the words. He realized that this encounter was more than a dream fulfilled. It was a turning point. The admiration he had carried for so long had been transformed into inspiration, and that inspiration now had a tangible form. A living reminder that courage and honesty could open doors he had only ever imagined. As he looked around the shop, he noticed the quiet faces of the other customers, the hushed whispers, the small smiles of those who had witnessed something extraordinary. The moment wasn't just about him and Ozzy. It was about connection, about the ripple effect of courage, about how one person's bravery to express themselves could impact everyone within earshot. And then, as the reality of the encounter fully settled in, one final question emerged, larger than all the others, unspoken yet heavy in the air. Could one moment of honesty and bravery truly inspire the world, even in ways you might never see? The boy's eyes met Ozzy's once more. There was no need for words, both understood the answer. Yes, it could. It already had. From the moment he had first spoken those 20 minutes of devotion, to the present, the impact was real. Every person in that shop had felt it. Every person who would later hear about it, who would see videos of it online, would feel it. One courageous act, one raw, unfiltered expression of admiration, had created ripples far beyond what either of them could have imagined. The boy took a deep breath, feeling the air in his lungs fill him with a renewed sense of possibility. He had started the day as just another visitor in a guitar shop, a fan quietly carrying his devotion. He was leaving with a story that would define him, a memory that would shape him, and an understanding of the power of speaking truth from the heart. Ozzy gave a final nod, a subtle gesture of encouragement and acknowledgement. "Go on, mate. Keep playing, keep sharing, and never forget the courage it took to speak your truth. That's the real legacy of admiration." The boy smiled, finally steadying his hands. He knew deep in his soul that this was only the beginning. His voice had been heard. His admiration had reached its mark. And one moment, one simple, brave, honest moment, had changed everything. And as he stepped out of the shop, guitar in hand, eyes bright and heart full, the final thought lingered. Could one person's courage to speak the truth really change a life, a city, or even the world? For him, the answer was no longer hypothetical. It was living, breathing proof. As the boy walked away from the shop, the cool air of the city brushing against his face, he felt something shift deep inside him. For the first time in a long while, the weight he had been carrying, the longing, the awe, the unspoken admiration, felt lighter. The encounter with Ozzy had changed more than just his day. It had changed the way he saw himself, his music, and the world around him. He thought back to the 20 minutes he had poured out his heart, speaking openly, honestly, without holding anything back. In that span of time, he had not only expressed his devotion, but he had also confronted his own fears, the fear of being unnoticed, the fear of insignificance, the fear that the person he admired most would never acknowledge him. And yet, there Ozzy had been, standing quietly, listening, understanding, and responding with warmth, kindness, and encouragement. The boy realized that the encounter was not just a gift from his hero. It was a reflection of his own courage. Without his willingness to speak from the heart, to express his admiration without hesitation, the moment could never have happened. It was proof that bravery, honesty, and authenticity were powerful tools, sometimes more powerful than talent, fame, or preparation. One person, willing to speak their truth, had created a moment that would echo far beyond the walls of that shop. He also reflected on the ripple effect of such moments. Every person who had witnessed the encounter, even quietly in the background, had been touched by it. They had seen the vulnerability, the honesty, the raw emotion, and the courage it took to speak without holding back. Those witnesses would carry the story forward in their own ways, sharing it, remembering it, perhaps even being inspired to act with similar authenticity in their own lives. And most importantly, he thought about what it meant to be a hero. For him, a hero was no longer simply someone distant, someone whose accomplishments or fame inspired from afar. A hero was someone who could connect, who could listen, who could recognize the courage and heart in another person. Ozzy had done all of that and more. But the boy realized that heroes also existed within him, the courage to speak, to express himself fully, to act on what he felt. He smiled softly, feeling a sense of calm and clarity. The encounter had ended, but its impact would last a lifetime. The admiration he had once held silently had been transformed into connection, inspiration, and possibility. And in that transformation, he understood the most profound truth of all, that courage, honesty, and the willingness to be seen can create magic that changes lives, sometimes for the speaker, sometimes for the listener, and sometimes for everyone who witnesses it. As he turned the corner, guitar case slung over his shoulder, he carried that lesson with him like a new song in his heart. One that would guide him, inspire him, and remind him, every single day, that the simplest, bravest act, speaking from the heart, could change everything.